Now transcribe Theatre Royal.
The National Broadcasting Company presents Sir Laurence Olivier, your host in Theatre Royal.
This is Laurence Olivier. In a few weeks' time, when the new stage play in which I'm appearing with my wife comes to London's West End, I shall have the pleasure of appearing each week in a different play on this program. But until then, I'm very happy to have the opportunity of introducing as my guests some of my own friends from the theater. Today's guest is an exceptionally good companion of mine, and we have had many very happy associations together on the stage. You may perhaps recall our visit to the United States some years ago with the Old Vic Theatre Company. I'm speaking, of course, of Ralph Richardson. Ralph has chosen for you a dramatization of a story by Joseph Conrad. It is, in my opinion, one of the best he ever wrote, and I think you will enjoy it. It has perhaps the simplest title of any story I know. Here, then, is Ralph Richardson in Joseph Conrad's story of the First World War, TheTale.
Outside the large single window, the late evening light was dying out slowly. In the long room, the irresistible tide of the night had run into the most distant parts of it, where the whispering of our voices, passionately interrupted and passionately renewed, had died away with the dying light. Now I could see only the faint oval of her upturned face, the pale immobility of her hands against the dark of her dress. Oh, we loved each other, yes, but there was little hope in that love. At last, she turned her head away.
Please. We can only hurt ourselves going on like this. You know that.
Oh, my darling.
Tell me something.
What am I to tell you?
Why not tell me a tale?
A tale?
Yes, why not?
Why not?
You used to tell your simple and professional tales very well at one time. You had a sort of art. That summer, 1914, the days before the war.
Oh, really? But now you see the war is going on.
It could be a tale not of this world.
Well, you want a tale of the other, the better world? You must call back someone who's already gone there.
No, I don't mean that. I mean some other world in the universe, not in heaven.
Well, I'm relieved. But you forget that I've only 5 days leave.
Yes. And I've also taken 5 days leave from my duties.
I like that word.
What word?
Duty.
It is horrible sometimes.
That's because you think it's narrow. But it isn't. It contains infinities. And so...
What is this jargon?
An infinity of absolution, for instance. But as to this other world, who's going to look for it? And the tale that's in it?
You.
Huh? As you will. In that world, then, there was once upon a time a naval commanding officer and a Scandinavian. It was a world of seas and continents and islands.
Like the earth?
Yes. A war was going on in that world, and many young men in it, mostly in wardrooms and messes, used to say to each other, it's a bad war, but it's better than no war at all. That sounds flippant, doesn't it?
Yes.
Let's get back to our commanding officer, who, of course, commanded a ship, a warship. But he used to be sent out with her along certain coasts to see what he could see, just that. Sometimes he had some preliminary information to help him, and sometimes he hadn't. It was in the early days of the war. The ship was sailing in northern waters, steaming along her beat in sight of a rocky, dangerous coast that stood out intensely black, like an Indian ink drawing on gray paper. Well, anything to report?
No, sir. Not so much as a fishing boat. Nothing stirring on shore there. The coast's absolutely deserted.
Never mind about the coast. It's the sea we're interested in. You know what used to amaze me was the way that the war never seemed to change it. Just the same expanse of water, neither more friendly nor more hostile. It's impossible to believe that that same horizon has now become one great circular ambush.
Yes, it is until you see a ship blow up all of a sudden and plop under almost before you know what's happened to her.
Then you believe it, all right. After that, you keep your eyes on her to see what you can see. You begin to wonder whether one day you may not die from something you haven't seen. You know, in some ways, one almost envies the soldiers. At the end...
Look, sir. Out there, ahead, on the starboard bow.
Quick, man, hard a port. It may be a mine. Ahead of the ship, something was floating and rolling lazily on the sea. Something, but what? The ship's course was altered to pass the object close. It was necessary to have a good look at it and to see what one could see, close, but without touching it. It was not advisable to come in contact with objects of any form floating carelessly about.
Small wreckage, perhaps. But there shouldn't be any wreckage here.
No, the last reported torpedoings were a long way westward. But one never knows. There may have been others that weren't reported, gone with all hands.
Yes. Seems to be a battle. Here, have a look through the glasses, sir.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Pretty obvious proof of what we've suspected all along. That certain neutrals round here haven't been quite so neutral as they should have been.
U-boats?
Yes. Replenishing the stores of U-boats. Somewhere not so very far off, either.
Yes, but why leave the evidence lying about like this?
Why, indeed.
Almost looks as though it had been done on purpose. But what on earth for?
More probably it was an oversight. Or maybe somebody had to get away quickly before they were spotted.
Well, it's proof of what we were pretty certain of before. And plain, too.
How much good it'll do us. The parties are miles away. The U-boat, the devil only knows where, but ready to kill. And the noble neutral slipping away to the eastward, ready with a pack of lies.
Yeah. Well, they won't have to lie very much. Fellows like that, unless caught in the act, are pretty safe.
Yes, I suppose they can afford to chuckle. They probably don't even care a rap for the bit of evidence left behind. It's a game where practice makes you bold, and successful, too.
Yes, well, perhaps this'll be once too often. May not have been all that long ago.
It doesn't have to have been by the look of things. Not in this kind of weather. You see, the fog's coming up again. A solid white wall of it. Well, here we go again. In 5 minutes, we were in the thick of it. Great convolutions of vapor flew over, swirling about our masts and funnel, which looked as if they were beginning to melt. Then they vanished. The ship was stopped. All sounds ceased. The very fog became motionless, growing denser as if solid in its amazing, dumb immobility. Men at their stations lost sight of each other. Footsteps sounded stealthily. Rare voices, impersonal and remote, died away without resonance. A blind, white stillness took possession of the world.
14 fathoms!
Well, what do we do now? Here, wait a minute. The fog's lifting.
Only in patches. Look, there's the shoreline again. Ah, that's a bit better.
38 fathoms!
Right. Now I know where I am again. We're going inshore.
Yes, but...
It's all right. I know this stretch of coast like the back of my hand. That peak there's the southern shore of a fjord. We're going to ease round into it and sit tight till the weather mends. There's plenty of sea room and we can drop anchor. Keep the leadsman stinging out. Slowly, with infinite caution and patience, they crept in closer and closer, seeing no more of the cliffs than the effervescent dark loom with a narrow border of angry foam at its foot. At the moment of anchoring, the fog was so thick, all they could see they might have been 1,000 miles out in the open sea. Yet the shelter of the land could be felt. There was a peculiar quality in the stillness of the air, very faint, very elusive. The wash of the ripple against the encircling land reached their ears with mysterious, sudden pauses. Well, that's that. There's about half a mile between us and the other side of the fjord. We can stay here till the fog lifts, We get a chance to see what we're doing again.
Well, it seems to be lifting already, sir. Back there, towards the open sea.
By Jove, it does. Quite a bright patch.
Here, wait a minute. What's that?
Give me the glasses.
I could almost swear.
Well, you'd be right then. There's another ship out there, lying at anchor.
Yes, but hang it. It's a wonder we didn't run slap into her when we came in.
Yes, it certainly is.
But why didn't she make herself known, rung her bell? She must have heard us coming in. We came in pretty quietly, admittedly, but they must have heard our leadsman at least. We couldn't have passed her more than 50 yards off.
Quite. What you might call a close shave.
And we never heard a sound from her. Fellows on board must have been holding their breaths.
I rather think that's what they were doing.
Ah. Had we better take a look at them, sir?
I think we better had. At first, I supposed she was just a coaster standing to. I'm not so sure the more I think about it. In fact, I'm not at all sure. Lower a boat and send a boarding party across to her. I want to know a little more about that ship.
Aye, aye, sir.
The boat was lowered and moved away into the fog. The white swirl of vapor that lay on the water spotted it up as though it had been sunk. Only the shadowy outline of the mystery ship remained afloat above the drifting whiteness. For a quarter of an hour, there was utter silence, and then the boarding party returned, appearing suddenly alongside. The officer in charge came up to make his report. Well, what is she, a coaster?
No, sir, a stranger, a neutral.
No, really? Well, tell us a little bit more about her, then. What's she doing here, anyway?
Well, they said they've had engine trouble, so they stood in here to keep out of the weather.
Did they? Well, how did they get in here if they had engine trouble?
I asked them that, sir. They said they were drifting about in the fog for 3 days. Then the wind got up, and they simply ran before it when they saw where it was taking them.
Well, I suppose that's just possible. The wind's in the right quarter, such as it is. There's hardly enough of it, I'd have thought.
Oh, no, sir, this was 4 days ago. Apparently there was quite a stiffish breeze blew up. They were even afraid of a gale.
Ah, well, that checks, too. If they're talking about last Friday. Quite a plausible story, isn't it? What about the ship's papers?
Our papers in perfect order, sir. I checked them carefully. She sailed from Gothenburg last Monday, 8 days ago, with a cargo for Newcastle. General merchandise, all checking with the manifest. From what I could see of her, sir, she's quite in the clear.
She is, eh?
Well, the master said he didn't know where they were, said they'd been drifting about so long in the fog, he didn't have any good idea of his position. He asked me for a bearing, but I didn't give him one till I'd checked with you, sir.
Good. Just one thing. What about her engines now? Are they still disabled?
No, sir, she has steam on them.
Oh, she has. Number one, you know, I think you were right after all. They were holding their breaths as we passed them. They certainly were.
In a moment, we continue with Theatre Royal. We'd like to remind you of the fine parade of good listening tomorrow night on NBC. Jerome Kern's musical drama Sonny takes the spotlight on The Railroad Hour, starring Gordon MacRae and lovely Lucille Norman. Then Howard Barlow and the Firestone Symphony Orchestra, joined with Metropolitan basso Cesare Siepi, the guest artist on The Voice of Firestone. Later, George London returns to The Telephone Hour, with Donald Voorhees conducting the Bell Telephone Orchestra. Top off your Monday evening of musical entertainment when Paul Laval conducts his city service Band of America in a double salute to the Safety Congress and National Bible Week. And you'll want to join that lovable pair, Fibber McGee and Molly, as they find themselves involved in another laugh-provoking misadventure the whole family will enjoy. That's followed by an amusing storytelling session as jokester Senator Ed Ford and his quick-witted partners Peter Donald, Harry Hirschfield, and former Governor Harold Hoffman get together to outdo one another on Can You Top This? Later Monday, enjoy a swashbuckling drama when MacDonald Carey stars in another thrilling episode of Jason and the Golden Fleece. And remember, tomorrow NBC joins the state of Ohio in a salute to popular funster Bob Hope, heard each morning with a quarter hour of helpful and hilarious tips to the housewife. For the best in listening entertainment, you'll want to stay tuned to your NBC radio network. And now we return to Theatre Royal.
I tell you, number one, I don't like it. I don't like it one little bit. Somewhere around here, we know very well, a German U-boat has been restocked, probably by a neutral vessel. Here in this fjord, we find a neutral vessel hiding away in the fog.
But her story was perfectly plausible, sir.
Yes, a little bit too plausible to my mind. If she wasn't trying to avoid us, why didn't she make herself known when we came in? She must have heard us.
Well, a fog like this does muffle small sounds, sir. And what could their object be, after all?
Sneak out unnoticed once we'd passed her by.
Oh, then why didn't they, sir? They might have done, you know. Not exactly unnoticed, perhaps. I don't suppose they could have slipped their cable without making some noise. Still, in a minute or two, they'd have been gone before we'd fairly made them out. Yet they didn't.
Well, I suppose that's true enough. What did you make of the crew, Johnson?
Oh, the usual lot, sir. The engineers, quite typical, I should say. Very full of the way they repaired their engines. The mate a bit surly, perhaps. Not much English. The master, rather an impressive sort of a fellow in his way. Typically Scandinavian. Civil enough, but appeared to have been drinking. Seemed to be recovering from a regular bout of it.
Oh, he did, eh? What instructions did you give him?
Oh, I told him I couldn't give him permission to proceed, sir. He said he wouldn't dare to move his ship her own length out in a fog like this, permission or no permission. I left a man on board all the same.
Quite right. Well, keep an eye on her as much as you can with all this fog about, and keep your ears open.
Aye, aye, sir.
I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit too suspicious, but I can't help feeling that this very plausible ship may very well have been the one that had a rendezvous with that U-boat out there.
But you could never prove it, sir.
Well, I don't know. I want to have a look at it myself.
But from the report we've had, I'm afraid you couldn't even make a case for reasonable suspicion, sir. Could you?
I'll go on board all the same. Muster another boarding party.
Aye, aye, sir.
What did I expect to find? Well, I couldn't have told anybody, not even myself. I suppose what I really expected to find there was an atmosphere, the atmosphere of gratuitous treachery, which to my mind nothing could excuse. But how could I detect it, sniff it, taste it, receive some mysterious communication which would turn my invincible suspicion into a certitude strong enough to provoke action with all its risks? I went aboard. The master, large, robust Scandinavian, led the way to the chart room.
It is not very comfortable, but while I am at sea, this is where I live.
Aha.
Oh, take a seat, please. What can I do for you?
Oh, it's nothing. It's merely a routine check. Your papers appear to be in order.
No, of course. If it had not been for trouble with the engines, we would have been in England, in Newcastle.
Instead of which...
So we are here.
Aha.
Oh, what I mean is, I don't know where we are. Oh, hang it all. For 3 days we drift in the fog with our engines broken down. I tell you, we might be anywhere.
So the fog's been after you for a week.
Yes, that's no exaggeration. 8 days. We leave Göteborg last Monday, last week. On Tuesday, I am somewhere south of here, and my engines break down. We drift in the fog, I don't know where, and then the wind gets up, and we put in here. Since then, there has been nothing but fog again.
Aha. So you've been anchored here all that time?
Yeah, that's right, 4 days. Now, isn't it enough to drive a man out of his mind? Well, and it's like this. This ship is my own. Your officer has seen the papers. She isn't much, as you can see for yourself, just an old cargo boat, just a bare living for my family. Those are their pictures up there.
Yes, you'll be making a fortune for your family with this old ship before you finish.
Please.
I mean, out of the war.
Ah, yes. Out of the war. Well, what of that? You wouldn't be angry about it, would you? Oh, you are too much of a gentleman. We didn't bring this war on you.
No, I suppose you didn't.
Oh, and suppose we sat down and cried. What good would that be? Oh, let those cry who made all the trouble. Oh, time is money, you say in English. Well, this time is money. Oh, yes, it is money, all right.
Well, I'm glad you're satisfied. Well, I suppose you've made it perfectly clear that the war's not your fault and why you're here. Your logbook confirms that very minutely. Of course, a logbook may be cooked.
Please.
I say a logbook may be cooked, faked, used as an alibi. Nothing easier.
Oh. But You can't suspect me of anything. My cargo is made out for an English port, in Newcastle.
True.
Well, then how can you suspect me? And what is it you suspect me of doing?
Well, I haven't said that I do suspect you. What makes you think I might?
But what you said about the logbook.
Well, I find you lying here with steam up, hiding in the fog.
But my engines have been repaired, so at last I can get steam up again.
Why didn't you make yourself known when you heard us coming into the fjord?
Well, I hear nothing. I do not know you were there until your boat come along.
But you must have heard our leadsman.
Please.
You must have heard the shout of our leadsman, taking the depth as we came by.
I was in this chat room. I hear nothing at all.
I wondered what he'd do if I accused him to his face of being what I suspected he was. Supposing I did that and watched his face, would he betray himself in some way? Oh, it was perfectly plain the fellow had been drinking. Oh, yes, he'd been drinking. We'd have had a lie ready all the same. I turned away in disgust and went up on the deck, where I had the crew mustered formally for an inspection. You the chief engineer?
Yeah.
What's been the trouble with your engines?
Please?
Your engines broke down, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. The main... how you say? The main feed became loose. And the steam was not right in the cylinder. Also, the condenser chamber was wrong.
When was this?
A week ago. Last Tuesday.
Uh-huh. You the mate?
Yeah.
Let me see your papers.
Oh, here.
Where did you join the ship?
You're the boy?
When?
Oh, 3 months ago.
This is your first trip to Hull?
We are not bound for Hull. We are bound for Newcastle.
I could discover no flaw in the logbook story. So at last I dismissed them. My impression of them was that they were a well-picked lot. They'd probably been promised a fistful of money each if the trip paid off. All slightly anxious, but not frightened. Not a single one of them likely to give the show away. At last I returned to the chart room. The master still lingered there. He appeared to have been drinking while I was away on deck.
Sit down, please.
I guess you're wondering at my proceedings, though I'm not detaining you, am I? I mean, you wouldn't care to move in this fog?
I don't know where I am.
You didn't happen to notice any unusual objects floating about while you were at sea?
Objects? What objects? We were groping blind in the fog for days before we put in.
We had a few clear intervals. And earlier today, I saw something out there that makes me suspect that not so very long since a U-boat was contacted and restocked. Perhaps by a neutral vessel.
Oh, I see. But you only suspect that. You have no proof.
Oh, well, perhaps not. But I also have my information. That's why I happen to be here at all. Shooting's too good for people that conceive neutrality in that sort of manner.
Oh, yes, perhaps.
No, there's no perhaps about it.
No, you are right. But what about the tempters? We better kill off that lot. There's 4, 5, 6 million of them. Oh, but I had better hold my tongue. You have some suspicions.
No, I've no suspicions.
Oh, well, let us put it like this. We know that you English are gentlemen, but, let us speak the truth. Why should we love you so very much? You haven't done anything to be loved. We don't love the Germans either, of course, but they haven't done anything for that either. When a fellow comes along with a bag of gold. Oh, I haven't been in Rotterdam on my last voyage for nothing.
Oh, I'm sure. You'll be able to tell our people something interesting when you get to Newcastle.
Oh, I might. But you keep some people in your pay at Rotterdam, so let them report. I am neutral, aren't I?
So you say.
Well, listen. Have you ever seen a poor man on one side and a bag of gold on the other? Oh, of course, I couldn't be tempted. I haven't the nerve for it. Oh, I tell you, it is nothing to me. I just talk openly for once.
Yes, I'm listening to you.
Well, now that I know you have no suspicions, I talk. You don't know what a poor man is. I do. I'm poor myself. This old ship isn't much, and she's mortgaged, too. Bare living no more. Oh, of course, I wouldn't have the nerve, but a man who has the nerve. See, the stuff he takes aboard looks like other cargo packages, barrels, tins, copper tubes, whatnot. He doesn't see it work. It isn't real to him, but he sees the gold. That's real. Oh, of course, nothing would induce me. I suffer from an internal disease. I would go crazy with anxiety or take to drink or something. No, the risk is too great. It would be ruin.
It will be death.
Well, it is nothing to me. I am not one of those.
No, of course not. Well, I'm going to clear you fellows off this coast at once, all of you. Now, begin with you. You must leave in half an hour.
What, leave in this fog?
Yes, you'll have to go in this fog.
But I don't know where I am. I tell you, 3 days I drifted, lost in the fog.
Uh-huh. So you do know how to get out, don't you? Well, I'm giving you your course. You steer south by east, half east, for about 4 miles, then you'll be clear to hold to the westward for your port. The weather will clear up before very long.
But please, in weather like this, I tell you, I haven't the nerve to do it.
I'm ordering you to do it. Unless you want me
No,
to.
I tell you, I have had enough of this board.
Yeah. You'll leave within the next half hour. You've steam, and I've given you your course.
But please, I do not know where I am.
I've given you your course.
Very well, sir. I have no choice.
I returned to my ship, leaving the master standing there as if he were rooted to the deck. Within the next 10 minutes, I heard their anchor being weighed. Then, shadowy in the fog, she steamed away out of the fjord on to her given course. Well, my dear, that's the end of the tale.
In fact, you let him go.
Now listen. That course would lead the ship straight onto the rocks beyond the mouth of the fjord. He steamed out, he ran into them, and went down. So, he had spoken the truth. He did not know where he was.
But surely...
I proved nothing. Nothing either way. It may have been the only truth in all his story. Yes. He seems to have been driven out by a menacing stare. Nothing more.
And you knew?
Ah, yes, I gave that course to him. It seemed to me the supreme test. I believe... No, I don't believe. I don't know. At the time I was 7. They all went down. I don't know whether I've done stern retribution or murder. I don't know. I shall never know.
Oh, my poor...
I shall never know.
This is Laurence Olivier again. I would like to extend my thanks to Ralph Richardson for that fine performance in Joseph Conrad's story, TheTale. Our thanks, as usual, should also go to the excellent supporting cast. I shall have with me as my guest on next week's program another good friend of the theater, John Gielgud. Until then, when I look forward to your company, au revoir, and thank you.
So Laurence Olivier introduced, as usual, today's transcribed program. The script was by D.G. Brightson. The music was under the direction of Sidney Torch. Theater Royal is an NBC presentation, produced and directed by Harry Allen Towers.
Hear Last Man Out, next on the NBC Radio Network.